This is David from the Fredcast. We're live from the show for INTERBIKE TV. We're here with Mike Ferrantino from Santa Cruz Bicycles, and we are standing in front of the Blur LT, a carbon fiber mountain bike. Tell me about this bike.
All right, the LT has long been our most popular bike. It sits right in the middle of a lot of ride characteristics. It's a general duty trail bike, 140 millimeters travel. A couple years ago we revised the Blur LT from an old VPP, virtual pivot point suspension, to the new generation stuff that we're using now. That was an aluminum bike. At the same time we were beginning some experiments with carbon fiber, which led us to trying to put this puppy together out of carbon fiber. So what we have is a 140 mil travel bike. It's a pretty unique suspension system. Virtual pivot point allows us to tailor the shock ratios a fair bit so that we can have a slight falling to a slight rising rate suspension. That means that at the beginning you've got good pedaling characteristics, good small bump compliance, and then a nice middle stroke to the travel, and then it progresses up at the end of travel to resist bottoming out. In conjunction with that, we have some really trick hardware, which we'll get into here. The lower link is an aluminum lower link. It runs on angular contact bearings. It has grease ports so that you can get into the ease of maintenance. You can extract all of the link hardware from this non-drive side of the bike. They're 15 millimeter aluminum axles that bolt through into the frame on the other side, and they have these little conical collet heads on them, and then preload the bearing and then lock them into this side of the frame. We use the same hardware up at the top where we have a carbon fiber link, but again, angular contact bearings, 15 millimeter low axle, collet heads that lock it in. It's a much more sophisticated set of hardware than anyone else is doing. That alone is kind of the reason to buy into the suspension. It's really bomber, easy to service if you ever need to service it, but incredibly reliable, incredibly effective suspension, good pedaling and good big bump performance.
Now, speaking of the performance of the frame, tell me about the decision to go to carbon and about how you alleviated any concerns people might have about a carbon fiber mountain bike.
Okay, well, carbon fiber kind of has a certain amount of stigma about it. In spite of the fact that almost everyone has been riding carbon fiber seat posts and carbon fiber handlebars for years, they still look at it and go, oh, it's weak. Right. As we were getting into carbon fiber with the Blur XC, which we released earlier this year before this bike, we began noticing some strength gains that could be made, partly through the material properties alone and also because of the proprietary way in which we're putting these bikes together. So what we ended up with as we were developing this is we've got a one-piece molding process. This doesn't mean that there's a lot of carbon fiber bikes are multiple tubes that are then laid into a mold and bonded together. That has all of the pitfalls of standard tube multiple part construction, where every time you have a joint like that, you have to add weight and you still sacrifice a little bit of strength. So what we have here, the front triangle is a single molded entity. There are mandrels that are put inside bladder. It's a single bladder for the whole front tube. All the frame mounting points are all part of that single mold process. We have incredibly precise control over the material thickness inside. There are extra layers of 3K weave on the bottom of the down tube to aid in rock ding strikes and impact strikes, as well as on the chainstay there. We're not afraid to show the insides of our frames. You can cut them apart. There aren't any wrinkles in there. We're really happy with the way these turn out. It's not necessarily magic, but it is a lot of hard work. It takes two people, probably 2.5 hours, to get the thing wrapped and into the mold before you do the curing process. So that's for each triangle, front triangle and rear triangle. What that translates to in the real world is this frame weighs 5.2 pounds with shock, which is about 1 pound lighter than the aluminum one. We probably could have gone lighter still, got it sub 5 pounds, but what we were aiming for was a ride characteristic that was stiffness. This bike is stiffer than a brick shit house. There's no flex in this frame anywhere, which combined with a suspension system that's already pretty flex-free, gives you this really good dynamic ride characteristic. And in terms of destruction testing, this thing surpasses anything we've ever built prior. Downhill bikes, jump bikes, big heavy 10-pound frames, it smokes all of them. It's really incredible. We probably overbuilt it.
Speaking of which, tell me about the head tube and what your design process was there.
Okay, we've gone to a tapered head tube, which is becoming fashionable in the industry at the moment for a lot of good reasons. We have a 1.5-inch bottom cup in the headset there, and then an 1.125 inset upper cup. What that allows us to do is run a tapered steer fork. You get the strength benefits and flex resistant benefits of this big bottom junction at the fork crown, and you don't have the contingent weight penalty of a 1.5 top headset and stem, because that hardware is still pretty heavy, whereas a lot of the Engine 8 stuff out there is really strong and really light. So we wanted to aim for that.
Really nice. Price point for this bike?
$23.99 for a frame, I think, and shock. Complete bikes start in the mid-3s, and we have a lot of different build options that you can play with. We've got, our website is a pretty up-to-date entity in that you can, and we're a unique company in that you can configure your bikes pretty much how you want. So we have 3 or 4 different complete bike kits, as well as what we call a la carte options, where you can build the bike with whatever drivetrains we offer, whatever suspension packages we offer. There are 3 different shocks you can use in this and about 8 different forks.
And what was that website again?
www.santacruzbicycles.com.
Excellent, Mike. Thanks so much. Have a great show.
Thank you. I will. You too.
This is David from the Fredcast. We're live from the show for INTERBIKE TV.